An often overlooked fact about the current Ebola outbreak is that it's a different strain than we've seen before. A different strain even than broke out this summer in the former Zaire. And that should raise a question. How did it get to Western Africa? If it was transmitted by animals, how did it migrate thousands of miles across the continent of Africa without some kind of an outbreak in between? And not only is it a different strain that spread far more than previous outbreaks, Dr. Francis Boyle points out that U.S. government labs have been in this area. Why are they putting these labs in those countries?
Well, it's very simple in try to circumvent the Biological Weapons Convention and my Biological Weapons Anti-Terrorism Act of 1989 that provides for life in prison. We have a BSL-4 in Guinea. We have one at the capital there, one in Liberia, Monrovia, and another one at Kenema in Sierra Leone.
So, was it released accidentally through experiments? In the past, we've had Ebola get out 3 times in lab contaminations. In 2 separate incidences in Russian labs, there were 2 deaths. And we've had 6 separate monkey outbreaks that didn't transfer to humans, but humans were affected. They developed antibodies, but they didn't get sick, meaning that they fought it off with their own immune systems, highlighting how important it is for you to have good immune system health.
The National Institutes of Health mated live Ebola with the virus for the common cold. And it very well might have been this type of vaccine that they were testing out over there at these BSL-4 facilities. We know that the Sierra Leone government shut down Kenema and accusing them of starting the pandemic with shots under the supervision of Tulane.
We just have a report that came out last Friday, basically kind of buried in the Friday news cycle. This is from the New York Times, and we haven't seen very much reporting about this. The White House said they were going to cut funding for risky biological studies. Now, this is them saying that they're not going to do any more weaponizing. What do you make of that?
Well, that's the smoking gun. Last Friday in the New York Times. You see, they de facto admitted that this is exactly what they were doing at those BSL-4 labs in the 3 BSL-4 labs in West Africa.
As we've seen, they evidently didn't focus on containing the disease or even on basic contamination protocols.
Go into an infected Ebola patient's room without covering your head, with only wearing one pair.
Okay, folks, and that's what we're going to be covering today. Obviously, Ebola, especially with another person contracting the virus in New York. This is the Uncensored Report. This is Frankie Abbruzzino. The goal of the show is to educate, inspire, and affect change. I don't want you to take everything I say as being what you should run with. I want you to take it as part of your research. Just like I don't want you to sit there and just take what major media puts out and run with that. Do your research, educate, get inspired to go out there and affect change. All right, this is a one-man operation, which is me, Frankie. I do the website, the research, the postings, the hosting. Everything you've seen is me. I'm doing it free for about a year in this format, and been doing it longer, 5 years plus for localized and then international, national, where I have I do some international stuff like my local media scoop pages over in Italy. Then I have this stuff. All in an effort to get the message out there to affect change. Now, we're going to discuss several things. Ebola is going to be one of the primary issues that we're going to discuss. As usual, though, what I'm going to do first is just do a quick, brief overview of some of the headlines that are out there. One thing I learned yesterday is my mic. When I'm in a radio studio, I'm used to the mic being right up in there in your face, and you're actually just got to be touching it like this. When I do back off, which I do a lot, the producer will go in and fix the adjust the volume accordingly, and as he's yelling at me in the earpiece. So I don't have that here on this show, so I'm going to try to focus on staying on this mic a little bit more versus jumping around like I always do. Let's see. We do have that the New York Stock Exchange, that the stocks, the futures, were taking a hit. They're doing a little bit of a tumble due to Ebola fears that are out there with the New York story, which I'm going to cover in a minute. It's amazing how some of this stuff's being handled, and right now that's the main story up there. 20 million Ebola confirmed in New York, a population of 20 million in New York, and then you got the Ebola confirmed there. We're going to be discussing that case a lot. I have not read these, but I'm going to be reviewing it, how the U.S. government has stockpiled hand sanitizer in case of an outbreak. But 84% of them are expired. That's coming from the London Independent. The war on terror targets underwear. Department of Homeland Security raids and the maker of unlicensed World Series panties. 50% of American workers make less than $28,000 a year. Those are some of the headlines from Infowars.com. Now we go over to the Daily Beast. They're talking about the Democrats' closing argument is jobs, 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 and if that's their strong closing argument, they're in trouble because they expect us to believe that those numbers they're putting out are the actual numbers, the actual job numbers, and you got to be a fool to believe that. You got to be a fool. I'm going to cover inflation numbers in a little bit, and you're going to see how they manipulate them. They massage them to their benefit. And the same goes for unemployment numbers, which they're going to cling on. What else they got here at the Daily Beast? They talk a lot about this doctor that went over to Ghana, came back, and for some reason didn't quarantine himself. But I'm going to save that because we're going to talk a lot more in detail on that. Let's see what else they're talking about. The people that have their son as James Foley. They're wondering, hey, why did you to the White House? Why did you save Bo Bergdahl, who was deserted the troops? Troops were killed looking for him. Yet you will not save. You did not save or try to save Foley. Actually, you threatened us. We got a guy. Another is a lone wolf, lone sheep. Basically, this is a guy that went to his Facebook. He was out there just ranting about Islam and the filthy Western Americans. And he went with a hatchet into the subway. And he tried to chop up some police officers. Got one in the arm as he tried to block it. Took another swing, missed. Third swing struck the guy in the back of the head. Cops eventually shot him. One straight bullet did hit a pedestrian that was standing there. And you hear about that on Breitbart.com. A WHO emergency panel is rejecting that Ebola travel ban is a concern. You got the civil rights officials that are chastising the Houston mayor for wanting the preachers' documentations or notes. And just they go into a lot about the history of their fight, Houston's fight with the preachers out there. The courts are siding with IRS in the Tea Party scandal, and this is a Bush-appointed judge that says no harm was done, which is amazing. Alan Keyes comes out and says Obama's destroying everything American, and they talk about Jews under siege in Jerusalem amid Obama's promise. So those are some headlines there. Over to the IntelliHub, they're talking a lot about the Colorado Infusion Center, which releases Ebola awareness bulletin about the Prime Minister over there in Canada and what he has to say after the terrorist attacks. And that's essentially it there. The American, they're talking about flexibility on UN drug prohibition. D.C. accused of the backdoor gun control, which I'm going to talk a little bit about. The waste book that Coburn puts out, which I'm going to discuss a little bit too. And those are essentially the headlines that are out there today. So now let's get into the main story, and I'm going to reflect a little bit on this Daily Beast article to pull some information because this essentially came out last night. I did not have time to prepare for it, but it involves this guy. The doctor's name is Craig Spencer. Now, here's the issue, and then we're going to get into this whole weaponized thing that I showed you with the video in the beginning. Here's the issue with this young doctor, though. This Craig Spencer, he's 33. He was over in Guyana, and he was working with Ebola patients, which is admirable. But here's the issue. And is it a bit selfish? He comes back. He doesn't quarantine himself, which a lot of people are saying, look, you're a doctor. You were over there working with these patients. You've seen what other doctors have contracted Ebola through this. Why wouldn't you take protective action and quarantine yourself? Especially when he started feeling ill. I guess what happened is on day 20 or somewhere around there, I forget, he started feeling really weak, really tired. The next day, he went for a run out in a public area. He met with friends. He went bowling. He was having sex with his girlfriend. And as you know, Ebola can stay in your sperm up to 71 days. He was, the next day he had a temperature. After the bowling, he had a temperature. He went in and he was diagnosed with Ebola. He was riding the subway the day before being diagnosed with the temperature. So a lot of people are concerned that this guy was out there, out and about, and that's why the market's taking a hit right now. Now, some other stuff that is you don't see on here, I saw it on Fox News, is the individuals that were in the individual's apartment investigating the situation, some officers, they were seen taking off the protective garments that they did have, and it did not seem like much. Now, when I saw the video, it showed them taking the mask off and some gloves, but they didn't have a full protective gear. To me, it didn't appear, unless they took it off prior. But what they did show is that they were taking the minimal protective gear that they did have and putting it right out into the garbage can in the front of the guy's apartment, which is obviously something we don't want to do, right? For some reason, they were dumping it all in there. So that brought up a concern. I saw that on Fox News today. The other concern is how this individual decided, and that's it on there. Let me shut that down. How this individual decided that it made a whole hell of a lot of sense to go out, drive in an Uber cab, take the subway, bowl with friends. And again, guys, when I used to bowl. When you're bowling, you're putting your hands in there. A lot of times, for some reason, it's hot in there. I sweat a little bit, not a lot, but you do sweat. People use the same balls. That's fluid. Also, do you have the guy, besides doing that, he was out jogging. What if he brushed up against someone? Now, the doctors on Fox was trying to minimize it, but the possibility is there, folks, that you can catch it. And should this doctor who works with it, that knows the hazards of it, that's been over in Guyana and seen the impact of this pandemic, should he have been more responsible? Should he have quarantined himself just in case? You know, they also brought up Fox News. They did a tour of the area that they used to have and hold the people that were infected. I think out of the 12 million people that came through Ellis, they said something like 1.2 million had to be quarantined. And I have a couple shows I've mentioned, Vito Corleone, how he came over and he was quarantined over in that area. So they would quarantine them. They would try different experiments because these people had diseases that normally you would die from, so they would try different things. And I guess only 3,500 of the individuals that were quarantined died, which is a good number. The rest were able to move forward and start new lives in America, like my father. So they, the question is how come we're not doing that again? How come we're not, if we know there's this virus there, and I'm not saying everybody, that'd be almost impossible, but we know right now it's in those 3 countries. So why aren't we taking those 3 countries when people come in, doing a thorough medical examination, keeping them under some type of, you can't do a forced quarantine probably, but some kind of self-quarantine. And these people have to know, if you're going over to Africa, if you're going to these 3 countries in Western Africa, you may face quarantine for 21 days when you come back. And it's for the safety of the community, safety of the residents of the United States, the citizens of the United States. put in some kind of quarantine. But I don't understand why they're not doing even the medical checks when they fly in. All right, they don't want to stop the flights. He said he doesn't want to stop the flights from Africa because he doesn't want to impact their economy. So he cares more about Africa's economy than he does the citizens of the United States first. That's a given. He said it. It was clear. It was out there. It's documented. It's on all the news reports about 2 days ago. So he puts in these temperature readers, which obviously aren't effective because this doctor went through one, I believe. They're not effective unless you have symptoms. And as again, you may be he may have been in an incubation period. I don't understand why they can't get there and say, okay, you've been in Ghana. Were you around anyone with Ebola? No, yes. Oh, yes, I was a doctor working with them. Okay, you're a doctor working with them. We're going to take extra precaution. We're going to really check you out, maybe put you on a mandatory quarantine just to make sure you don't have it. Person comes through. I don't think I was around anyone. Now, you got to do somewhat of an honor system, which sucks because they could easily lie. Okay, you don't think you were. Let's do an exam just to make sure. Then let's put you on a voluntary quarantine and suggest that you not go around. You suggest you don't have sex with your wife. Suggest that you don't go around people and trying to minimize it as much as possible. We got to do something. We got to be proactive here, folks. We can't continue to do it the way we've been doing it. It obviously is not going to work that well. You have many doctors out there, and this is coming from many doctors, that the thought is that Ebola patients are disappearing out of hospitals. And what they revealed, and this was on InfoWars, that health authorities are covering up the whole Ebola crisis in the United States, that patients are disappearing. And they're doing this in an effort to avoid hysteria. And they had this James Lorenza. He's a DO. And he has 2 clinics in Garden City and Archie, Missouri. He was on Alex Jones. And he warned that the true scale of the situation was being deliberately downplayed. Now, he hasn't had any Ebola outbreaks there. But he said, he was talking about Duncan over in Texas. He said, look, he was told by a doctor in Truman, Lakewood Medical Center in Kansas City, that they had taken in a possible Ebola patient who had a high fever and was bleeding all his orifices. And he just recently came back from West Africa. So, high temperature, bleeding like crazy, just back from West Africa. Alarm bells. He says, however, though, the following day, the doctor said that the patient had just disappeared against medical advice. But he wouldn't have been able to leave on his own given his medical condition. So who took him? Conspiracy? I don't know. Accurate? I don't know. A second possible Ebola patient was admitted into the Research Medical Center in Kansas City the following day. But he also quickly disappeared, with hospital bosses claiming he had typhoid. The patient disappeared, and the fear is that they're doing something with these patients. Then you have large hospitals like the Hospital Corporation of America, HCA. It's a private sector hospital. Earlier this week, they removed all of their protective gear and hazmat suits from the local hospital without replacing it. So the questions are, why? Why would you do that, especially with this epidemic starting up? So there's a lot of concerns out there. What's happening with these disappearing doctors? And this isn't just one doctor. In this case, it's one doctor, obviously. But there's several out there that are saying the same thing. We just saw that whole weaponized thing. And what a lot of people don't realize, or they don't want to believe, is that the United States was actively over there working with Ebola. That many people in Africa actively believe that we spreaded HIV over there and we spreaded Ebola. Operating out of South Africa during the apartheid era, Dr. Basin launched a secret bioweapons project there, and he called it Project Coast. There's an interview with him shortly here. Let me see if we want to play it. Hold on. Basically, this guy says that the goal of the project was to develop biological chemical agents that could either kill or sterilize the black population and assassinate political enemies. Let's take a brief listen to it and see what we can do here. Hold on.
Nothing could have prepared me for Dr. Death's unrepentant manner.
We decided to find those organizations in the world that could help us with technology. And of course, they were mostly in the UK, in America, odd few stations in Europe. And we then visited these places, explained to them what was our problem, what our problem was, and then of course we told them what the information that we needed, and we then eventually got some of the information from them. The rest we bought, borrowed, and stole. Strangely enough, in America and in the UK, the help that came from there was ideological.
Did you know David Kelly? Did you have a relationship with him?
I met Mr. Kelly on 3 or 4 occasions, from a pure information exchange point of view. The little contact I had with him, I found him to be an intelligent, honest, keen fella who really cared about his work.
Did you ever meet him in Portendale?
That I can't answer, but we did meet him on a few occasions.
What was the extent of Basson's relationship with Kelly and the West's most secret military labs?
You were able to visit Portendale, Fort Detrick.
Yes, we did that.
I wonder if you could talk about it.
No, I wouldn't like to, but I mean, the next question that I get asked is who arranged it and why and what and where, and then, I already have hassles with the UK and the American governments. I don't need any more, thank you. It's enough for me. But suffice to say, we went there with no objective of ever doing any damage to either the UK or the USA. Our sole objective was to make sure or to determine what they could do to help us and how we could enhance our own program based on their knowledge.
The people who knew Larry Ford, his neighborhood, they had no idea what he was up to, that he was working with the South African Germ Warfare Program. Larry Ford was messing around with chemical biological warfare.
Larry was a wonderful fellow, mad as a hatter. He used to rock up in South Africa, having flown intercontinental flights with a trousers pocket full of goodies in sealed vials that he claimed were new and wonderful organisms and could do the most wonderful things on Earth.
Larry Ford had mutated cholera, typhoid, anthrax, botulism, bubonic plague, and had also come up with germs that he called kaffir-killing germs. Kaffir, as you may know, in Afrikaans, is the equivalent of the N-word. So these were germs that were specifically engineered to kill only black people.
In other words, an ethnic biological weapon. Had Project Coast really gone this far?
From the beginning, this idea of can we find a way to control the size of the black population was considered one of the most important areas of research. It got even more important over time as the size of the black population and the seriousness of the uprisings increased. So that's one reason why they got into genetic modification, research into is there a way to have contraceptives that could somehow basically sterilize blacks without them knowing it, and kind of all kinds of what at the time, or in hindsight, seemed like pretty far out research.
There was some talk about an ethnic weapon Project Coast working on. There was, quote, black bomb.
That was great, yeah. That was the most fun I've had in my life. That whole episode of the ethnic weapon was very well set out in court, in the court papers. What happened is we had the objective to synthesize a certain protein that was in sperm for contraceptive purposes. The objective was that if you could immunize a woman against sperm, then you would make her infertile. We were asked to do this by another country who had a population explosion problem as part of an exchange of technology. They were giving us other stuff. They asked, well, we haven't got the time or the place to do that. Will you guys do that?
So I'm sorry, I don't think you guys heard me. What do you think of that? Interesting perspective, interesting interview there on Ebola and how it started, how it's created, how a lot of these diseases are manufactured over in Africa. And some of them are designed to target African Americans. Now, this next video we're going to watch, and we're going to watch it briefly, is about the concern with an Ebola inevitably coming across the southern border.
Something. Interviewing multiple medical doctors, Harvard medical doctors, you name it, over the years. And a lot of articles have been written about this. You can look them up for yourself. There's a lot of evidence that Ebola was developed in laboratories and then released in the jungles of Western and Central Africa.
Larry Ford had mutated cholera, typhoid, anthrax, botulism, bubonic plague, and had also come up with germs that he called kaffir-killing germs. Kaffir, as you may know, in Afrikaans, is the equivalent of the N-word. So these were germs that were specifically engineered to kill only black people.
In other words, an ethnic biological weapon.
As it mutates, it will become more aggressive and even airborne. And then one of the heads of the University of Texas Biology Department, who is a global exterminist, he believes that at least 90% of the population should be reduced. His acolytes, his graduate students that are now medical doctors, PhDs, microbiologists, responded to us criticizing him 6 years ago and the FBI visiting him by sending me open letters that we published saying, listen, we will exterminate everyone. In fact, here's quotes from the Texas newspapers that reported on it out of Houston. I watched in amazement as a few hundred members of the Texas Academy of Sciences rose to their feet and gave standing ovation to a speech that enthusiastically advocated the elimination of 90% of the Earth's population by airborne Ebola.
We are an epidemic waiting to happen. And because we're so mobile and so dense, we can get on airplanes and fly across oceans.
No, I think
disease is going to spread fast. And the people who've studied this, the epidemiologists,
that's a common view,
and medical people are very, very concerned about the next pandemic.
The 2014 wave of upwards of 300,000 illegals crossing the United States southern border is only the beginning.
He's told the world that with a stroke of his pen, he will, by presidential directive, by executive order, provide legal status to 5 to 6 million people unlawfully in the country. Allowing any president to nullify law is a threat to the future of our republic and to the ultimate power of the people to control it.
As Obama's failed policies, scandals, and questionable leadership open a deep wound in the Democratic Party's dwindling chances.
Do you approve of the job President Obama is doing? Now, there'll be a chance to follow up, but this is a yes or no answer. Do you approve, yes or no?
In some ways I approve, in some things I don't approve.
President Barack Obama's administration missed their projected September 21st deadline.
What's your name?
Charlie.
Charlie?
Yeah.
Who are you with, Charlie?
Breitbart News.
Okay.
The recent story on the U.S. CIS preparing for a surge of government IDs. Do you have a response to that?
I don't. I'd refer you to USCIS on that. I don't have any information about that.
But it is coming. Leon Rodriguez, the director of the U.S. Citizen and Immigration Services, is hiring more asylum officers as a greater tsunami of illegals is expected by year's end.
So would you please tell us what is next on the president's agenda?
The directive that we have received is to examine possibilities for different avenues to exercising that prosecutorial discretion. I know that our secretary is in a process of engaging with frontline employees at DHS members of Congress from both sides of the aisle, and stakeholders from a broad spectrum of American society. That process is ongoing.
Alarms of Ebola infiltrating the wide open and unprepared U.S. southern border have been numerous.
The immediate thing that really keeps me up awake at night, I'll tell you.
So there you have it, Ebola. Some of the concerns that are out there, some information that many of you have probably never heard. Again, am I asking you to buy into it? No. Have I bought into most of this? Yes. I'm asking you to research it. Look into it. Don't just take it for, for what I'm saying. Do your own research. It's education. That's key. We'll be right back after this message.
Is your money manager giving you safety and security? Wouldn't you like to make your money work harder for you? Then you should consider joining philsgang.com, where thousands of individual investors have successfully profited.
This year I'm up 60% on my portfolio. Following your system has been fantastic. I've been with you for about a month and a half now, and I'm already up 7%.
I've been in the business for a long time, and you're really one of the best I've ever heard.
Well, I just want to let you know what a great teacher you are.
For over a decade, philsgang.com's Phil Grandy and Donald Cogswell have been teaching, coaching, and investing right along with all Phil's Gang members.
I want to thank Donnie for market wrap. I bought 2,500 shares of AUI and sold it this morning at $820 profit.
Why not join thousands of satisfied Phil's Gang customers today? Go to philsgang.com, philsgang.com, or call 877-600-4264. That's 877-600-4264. Call today. Is your money...
Okay, that's Phil's Gang. Check them out. He's my sponsor of my weekend program. He has a show that is live Monday through Friday at 9 and again at 3. He talks about financial and economic issues and social issues which are impacting our financial markets. Now we're going to go into discussing the inflation. We're going to follow on Phil's footsteps here. And we're going to talk about, and I briefly saw this article, and I'm going to refer to this article a lot. And it was put out yesterday. I think I mentioned it at the beginning of the show, and it's about low inflation and how the price of ground beef has risen 17% over the past year. And essentially how the Federal Reserve, thanks to them, the middle class is slowly being suffocated by rising food prices. But they won't tell you that. They will lead you to believe, the government, that there's only a 1.5% increase or 1.5% on the inflation rate, which is not accurate. And what I'm fair is that these guys aren't shopping at Publix or my local grocery store or Winn-Dixie or any other grocery stores. But thanks to this whole Federal Reserve, the middle class is essentially slipping away. Every single dollar in your wallet is constantly being less valuable because of the inflation that the Fed is systematically creating. And if you try to build wealth by saving money and earning interest on it, you will lose, because thanks to the Federal Reserve and their near zero interest rates policies that the banks have now, that they pay essentially next to nothing on savings accounts. And they either want you to spend money or put it in some kind of giant casino or play the stock market to build up the economy for the banksters, for the large corporations. But when Americans spend their paychecks, they're finding that they don't stretch as far as they once did. And that's because the cost of living continues to rise, and it's rising at a much faster pace than what our wages are. Unfortunately, our wages are going down and the food prices are going up. It's not even an issue of the wages not raising at the same pace. They're just not raising, they're going down. And it's causing a huge disparity. And in this article, they refer to just the price of beef and how it's gone up 17% in just the last 12 months, which is pretty accurate. I love hamburgers. I buy hamburgers a lot. Prices going up. Steaks, we eat a lot of steak. Meatballs in my pasta. A year ago, back in September, the average price of ground beef was $3.50. It's climbed 59 cents, 60 cents in just about a year. But those intellectuals over at the Federal Reserve, at our government, or at Obama's White House, they're insisting that there's little inflation. And that's good for the economy, which it is, if it is little at 1.5%. But the truth is that the inflation is slowly robbing us of our buying power, especially with our wages being driven down. Again, if your paychecks were going up at the same rate or even faster, it would be okay, but that's not the fact. And I think it was CNN that put out there that the wages have fallen back to 1995 levels, folks. This is not a good thing. And this is one of the primary reasons why the middle class is disappearing in America. It's due to the purchase power of our dollar and how it's continually diminishing. And this could just be the beginning. Right now, several drought. You got the drought that's impacting the agriculture, which is driving up those prices, and this is around the globe. Most people are aware of the nightmarish drought in California. Brazil's even worse. Most people don't hear about that. And they're one of the most important food exporters in the world. In addition to that, you have these black swan events, such as the worldwide explosion of Ebola, which I just covered, the black swan, and the weaponization of Ebola. That could drive up food prices. It's driving up food prices in the countries that are dealing with the pandemic right now over in West Africa. If you're storing food might be a good thing. It might be a great long-term decision. Without a doubt, prices are going to continue to go up. But the Fed Reserve, the government, Obama will continue to insist that it's under control. And they're doing this by looking at what they call their official numbers. And essentially, the official numbers is an accounting game. And they regularly change the way the inflation is calculated. When food prices rise sharply, they're stripped out of the calculation factor, followed by used cars, kids' toys, jewelry, housing, and so on, until around half the CPI basket was excluded, which is distorting the price. And like I said, they'll take essentially 30 numbers. They may use this number for used cars one month. The next month they'll go to something else because used cars have risen, but this one has stabilized or this their number has lowered. And that's how they create it. So they throw numbers out of that CPI and they figure out what inflation is and they try to make it level off at 1.5. It's all a huge game to them, but it's not a game to us as the common folk that are out there shopping at Publix. To them, it's all about getting the right number to release to the public. Just like the market, the stock market, you're seeing that it's up now. It was up over 200 points yesterday. This Ebola scare probably will have some impact on it today. But the goal is for Obama, he wants that market up until after the elections. Because he doesn't want more ammunition to be given to the Republicans in their fight against the Democrats. And like I said on this inflation, go to the grocery store. You'll see what's happening to food prices. You'll share the same concerns I am. The next time you get in the checkout register and feel tempted to ask the cashier, what organ should you donate to pay for these groceries? But keep in mind, it's not the cashier's fault. Jesus, they're working for minimum wage probably. And we should just blame one entity, and that's our government, the Federal Reserves. And the Federal Reserve is private, actually. It's a private bank. It's not even the government. Yet their policies are slowly pushing the middle class out to oblivion. And it should be a concern for everybody. Now, one other thing, because I for some reason I'm behind on time here. And I usually, with Fridays, I cut my shows short. It looks like I got maybe 5 minutes or something like that, 10 minutes. I could go longer. But this is a concern of mine. And it's basically that they are planning no refusal blood draw checkpoints in Ohio. Is this not a Fourth Amendment violation? Is this not a concern that our rights or their rights in Ohio are being violated? These no refusal checkpoints have the drivers, they'll be stopped, they'll be forced to stop, and potentially have to submit to having their blood taken out on the side of the road by some law enforcement authority that deems it's necessary. So they're saying that every car will be checked to ensure drivers are not impaired. If there's sufficient probable cause to believe that a driver operating the vehicle is impaired, law enforcement's going to come up and they're going to do a blood search warrant. The time and the location of these blood checkpoints won't be released till hours just before that. So some unsuspecting person might run into it. They may not be impaired, but the cop says, oh, you're impaired. Next thing you know, they're forcing you to give blood. And once a search warrant is obtained, a nurse would draw the blood and check for alcohol or drugs. It's not specified whether the blood draws will take place on the side of the road or if they'll bring you to jail to do it. You know, and practices of taking blood from motorists suspected of being under the influence has been the law in numerous states for years. But many people remain unaware of it, unaware of this violation of our simplest rights. And I'm going to show you a clip in a few minutes where you have individuals that are complaining, showing zero resistance, and they're having their heads forcibly pushed down to have blood taken. What country is this? Is this China? Is this Russia? No, this is the United States. Holding you down, forcibly making you submit, is really intrusive. It's invasive. In 2005, the Supreme Court ruled that this is not unconstitutional for the state to hold you down, hold Americans down, and forcibly withdraw blood. I covered yesterday how the courts are making totally unconstitutional decisions. Now, what this did is it affirmed that in January, back in last year, the ruling affirmed that a warrant must be obtained for the process, but they can do it. And also that citizens are also being intimidated into participating into these so-called voluntary drug survey checkpoints, during which private firms working on the behalf of the White House are out there swabbing your cheeks for DNA. And I think a few months ago I put out the video on that, where an officer off duty, he's working for the government, he's doing part-time thing. They'll pull you over and ask you to voluntarily submit, and they'll try to pressure you into it, even though you don't have to. But a lot of people see this officer, an officer of the law, and they think, oh, God, he can't be breaking the law. He must be doing it, and it must be right, and let me submit. And look, evidence clearly indicates that sobriety checkpoints have little to do with any saving of lives or catching drunk drivers, and everything to do with revenue generation. Revenue generation. And that's what it's all about, folks. So let's take a quick look at this video.
For an answer, officers now obtain a search warrant to forcibly draw blood and get evidence for the case. The key word there, of course, forcibly. But the video you have got to see, Randy. It is amazing.
Everybody would agree that this is disturbing video, Russ.
Are you serious? I've never been raped by rape. This is so unnecessary.
No! Excuse me, hold on. I never fought nobody. I didn't ever do nothing. What the hell is y'all doing?
What they're doing at the Gwinnett County Jail is strapping down suspected drunk drivers to a gurney so a nurse can take their blood. Evidence that can be used against them later in court, even though the suspects refuse to give their consent.
What country is this? What country is this?
Of invasive procedure into somebody's body is ridiculous for investigating a misdemeanor.
Intrusive, certainly. Invasive, you bet. But legal. Yes, say authorities, even though the law supposedly gives you a choice.
We all are American citizens, and you guys got me strapped to a table like I'm in Guantanamo Bay.
At the Gwinnett County Jail, every forced blood draw begins with strapping down the suspect on a padded table and putting them in a head grasp. Every time, whether they're compliant or complaining.
We can't take the chance that you're not going to lose your emotional control during a situation that is so sensitive.
And it's not just male DUI suspects. This woman eventually pled no contest. Another is still waiting for her day in court. Both showed no resistance, but deputies still strapped them down.
Is there any concern that this just doesn't look good? You know, I understand perception, but the reality of that perception is we work in an environment to where experience has shown us that you can play Russian roulette if you want to, but it's going to catch up to you.
Told me I'm arrested. They're taking my blood without my consent.
Michael Chaworski's only DUI arrest turned into the worst night of his life. He's yet to go to trial and says he's not guilty.
I'm not fighting you, dude. Don't push me too hard. I'm not fighting you.
And
Nobody should have to do that.
But a state law passed in 2006 allows police to ask a magistrate for a search warrant for blood in any DUI case. Since January, Gwinnett authorities have done forced blood draws more than 100 times.
You're being served with a search warrant for 2 vials of your blood, which you're going to take now.
In terms of forcing people down and holding them to stick a needle in their arm to get it, I think it's just an unreasonable search of those people.
Another showdown between personal liberty and public safety.
There's hardly anybody that you can talk to that doesn't know somebody that was killed by a drunk driver. We ought to do something about that, don't you think?
Even the most compliant.
I get the concern about drunk drivers. I get the concern about getting them off the streets. I'm a firm believer in that. I don't drink and drive whatsoever. I saw a friend of mine die when we were back in the 80s in Venice. I get it. What I don't understand and what I don't agree with is taking someone's blood, strapping them down because you suspect them of something. It's ridiculous. It's unconstitutional. What has our society turned into, folks? And that's the question I have for you. All right, that's going to be the show for today. Now, remember, tomorrow, Saturday, I do have my Saturday show at 12 o'clock. If you're here in Sarasota County, it's on 9:30 a.m. If you're out of Sarasota County or you're not around at 12 o'clock, you can catch the show at thescoopradioshow.com. I do have an interview with the Allman Brothers one of the founders, the guitar player, and he's a Grammy winner, Hall of Famer, Dickie Betts, about a benefit concert he's doing here on November 1st. So check it out, and I will see you again on Monday at 11. Everybody have a great weekend.